Banker and arch villain Jamie Dimon is coming out with some pretty good words about income inequality. In fact, here's what he said in a recent annual letter to JP Morgan shareholders. Quote, many of our citizens are unsettled, and the fault line for all this discord is a fraying American dream. The enormous wealth of our country is accruing to the very few. In other words, the fault line is inequality. So now the guy, of course, is very much qualified to talk about this, as he is one of the people that all the money went to. I think he's worth over $1 billion. Yes, so he's not quite Jeff Bezos level wealth, but the guy has more money than any of us could ever spend in one lifetime, generally. All right. So he continues. He says, the cause is staring us in the face, our own failure to move beyond our differences and self-interest and act for the greater good. Okay, do you know where this is going? Hopefully he's basically referring to us, as in his fellow rich people. Because if he's not, well, then that's bad. That means that he's blaming all these economic issues on the voters, the regular people who are the ones being screwed over. So now let's dive into it. Let's see, right? He said the good news, though, is that it's fixable. The Chinese, oh, here we go. The Chinese see in America that is losing ground in technology, infrastructure, and education, a nation torn and crippled by politics, as well as racial and income inequality, and a country unable to coordinate government policies, fiscal, monetary, industrial, regulatory, in any coherent way to accomplish national goals. Unfortunately, recently, there is a lot of truth to this. Interesting. Dimon added that economic growth in the U.S. over the last 2 decades has been painfully slow, while income inequality has increased with virtually no growth in income at the lower rungs of the economic ladder. Now, so far, of course, he talks about the effects of what's going on. And those are demonstrably true. Okay, you can look at political polarization. Yes, are we more polarized than before? Absolutely. Are we, even more divided? Are the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer? Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, yeah, he's right about this stuff. In fact, I've got some data to really kind of back it up, to make the point. According to Pew Research, the middle class, which once comprised a clear majority of Americans, has been shrinking, and therefore a greater share of the nation's aggregate income actually goes to the upper income households, and the share of going to middle and lower income households is falling. So there's as I mentioned, middle class shrinking. Not there anymore. And it's because a lot of this money goes to the very, very rich. So again, if you want to talk about income inequality and the fact that people who are incredibly wealthy, again, you're talking about your Jeff Bezoses and your Bill Gates and all them. Well, then, yeah, that's where all the money's going, essentially. All right, you want to talk about that? That's great. Well, what do we do about it? Well, he's not done yet. And in fact, I'm not done yet either. I've got more stats for you, which are interesting about, how bad this is actually getting, how much money is going to the rich compared to everyone else. In fact, since 1980, incomes have increased faster for the most affluent families, those at the top 5%, and for families in the income strata below them. The top 1% incomes grew 5 times as fast as the bottom 90% of incomes from 1979 to 2015. And of course, there are reasons for that. The reasons being that people aren't getting paid. And regular people, they go to work, they bust their ass, they're not getting money for it. At least not enough to survive. So now you've got the issue of disappearing benefits. What jobs do people have that really offer comprehensive health benefits anymore? I mean, you really don't see any, okay? You also have recessions where banks, for example, Bank of America, those other giant banks kind of crash the economy and create these recessions when they, of course, do like derivatives and all these financial tricks in order to basically get rich. You have executive bonuses that are massively huge. You have hedge funds that do short sales, basically encouraging companies to go bankrupt betting on them to go bankrupt and then reaping profit from that while people lose their jobs. You've got the vulture capital firms that specifically buy out companies that are going bankrupt in order to take them over, load them up with debt, liquefy the assets, and sell it off, as well as fire everyone who works there. All right. And then, of course, you have increasing prices for homes. You have increasing prices for education. For example, college costs over 1,000% since the 1960s. And then, of course, you have the cost of healthcare that continues to dramatically increase. And so you've got all these things that are working against regular people. You have all these things working against the middle class. Wells Fargo is another good one. Another good example of a company, of a bank that helped crash the economy back in 2008. Now, Dimon also pointed out that 30% of Americans make less than $15 an hour, which he added is barely a living wage. Oh, great. Now, it's not a living wage. In fact, if wages increased with productivity, the minimum wage would actually be about $23 an hour. If wages rose as fast as CEO pay, however, it'd be nearly $40 an hour. But of course they didn't. Right now, the federal minimum wage is stuck at about $7.25. $7.25 an hour. That's horrendous. As another result of the inequality, of course, 40% of all Americans have a difficult time affording a $400 emergency. And now 17% of the adults in the US said that they are not able to fully pay off all of their current month's bills. And of course, it got worse as a result of the pandemic. Dimon wrote this: the COVID-19 pandemic, for which our nation was totally unprepared, capped by the horrific murder of George Floyd, shoved into the spotlight our country's profound inequities and their devastating effects. Inequities that have been there for a long time. Once more, our country suffered, and at least well-off individuals suffered the most. Unfortunately, the tragedies of the past year are only the tip of the iceberg. They merely expose enormous failures that have existed for decades and have been deeply damaging to America. According to Dimon, the other issues facing the U.S. include capitalism versus economic systems. Oh, that's an interesting discussion. Healthcare, immigration policy, and the U.S.'s leadership role globally. He said that institutions such as government, school, media, and business have lost credibility in the eyes of the public. And now, again, a lot of that stuff he's not wrong about. He's actually spot on about some of the problems. However, we're going to get to a part where we massively disagree. And that's, of course, when it comes to solutions. Now, of course, he wants to raise the wage to $15 an hour. I'm, of course, in favor of that. I think it should go higher. I think it should go to the point of where it was tied to, where it basically kept up with inflation or CEO pay. Again, $15 an hour versus $23 versus $33 an hour. That's what it takes now to live with dignity in this country. And so, again, he's not wrong about all this, but where he is wrong is he says the consequences of the failures that it fuels is populism. Populism. Now, he says that as if it's a bad thing, and then goes on to try to basically equate both sides. Like, you got populism on the left, which is bad. Populism on the right, that's bad. And they're both bad. The populism bad. We don't like that. Okay, well, now hold on here. Okay. But first, let me get to the quote. He says, populism is not policy. We cannot let it drive another round of poor planning and bad leadership that will simply make our country's situation worse. So now, look, he's talking about Trump. Was Trump an effect of populism? Yes, but he was not a populist. And that's the thing. Yes, he is a populist in the fact that he basically parroted and told everybody what they wanted to hear. And by everybody, basically people who are racist, sexist, misogynistic, etc., right? Homophobic, all that stuff. He told those people what they wanted to hear because they were the most malleable. They were the most easy to manipulate into voting for him. Because thinking people, smart people, generally didn't go for Donald Trump. We saw through this. We saw through the, through the bullshit. Okay. And it's like, this dude seems like he's trying to take us for a ride by telling us everything that he thinks that we want to hear. And in reality, his policies were not populist at all. Massive tax cuts on the rich, deregulation, didn't do anything about climate change, really messed up when it came to COVID-19. That's what lost him the election, in my opinion. And so he did a lot of things that were not populist. And so to equate him as a populist and to equate him to people like, say, Bernie Sanders, who is more populist, is pretty disingenuous. Okay. And so now the populism, as I said before, espoused by Bernie Sanders is not just popular, it's also good policy. For example, Medicare for all ends up saving money in all the studies that have been talked about, that have been, that have come out about Medicare for all, show that it is not only leads to better outcomes, but it also, as I said, is actually cheaper when it comes to the government. And so when it comes to expenditures in healthcare, turns out cutting out the blood-sucking middlemen that are the insurance companies actually leads to lower prices. Not only that, but also reining in pharmaceutical companies that right now have been getting billions and billions of dollars in subsidies and giveaways. For example, the COVID-19 vaccine. Get it if you can. And I encourage everyone to go and get that vaccine. But understand that I did a report a couple of days ago where these companies, they're like, well, once the pandemic is considered to be over, we're going to massively upcharge our COVID vaccine. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that for one, you're like massively going to increase the price on something that is publicly funded in the first place. We already paid for that. Yes, you did the research, actually colleges and things like that did a lot of the research, but a lot of this research was basically publicly funded. Massive giveaways in most of these cases. I think there was one company that didn't take any federal monies to develop their vaccine, but the rest of them did. And so to turn around and charge us more for this vaccine, it's the same game that they've been playing for decades. It's the same game that they played with, for example, Pharma Bro played with that one drug, turning it around and selling it, marking it up for a massive amount of money. They do the same thing with the EpiPens. And so you have this system that is extractive and trying to extract everything they can from you in order to go into their pockets. And you just happen to need that to survive. And so, yeah, that's a big problem here. And Bernie Sanders and people who advocate for Medicare for all also advocate for reining in those companies and eliminating health insurance companies, which are essentially a middleman at this point. Okay. Not only that, but raising the minimum wage. He even talked about, Dimon also talked about the minimum wage. Oh, it's only $15 an hour. Well, what do you think? Who do you think started this conversation, or at least brought it into the national spotlight? It was Bernie Sanders back when Obama and everyone else was talking about raising it to $10 an hour. There's more, taxing the rich. Taxing the rich is a super popular idea, and now it's one that the Biden administration is also talking about as well, in order to fund a massive infrastructure project. So these things, yes, they are popular because it turns out that they're good ideas. And so dismissing them for being, just populist, again, bad, terrible position. And I say that he's dismissing them because he dismisses the messenger. He's dismissed Bernie Sanders, as well as everyone that is basically the social democrats that are in Congress right now. And so these policies, this is where populism and good policy meet. And remember, Bernie Sanders is, I know this is going to blow some of your minds, right? Bernie Sanders is not a wild-eyed socialist. He is not the second coming of Karl Marx, okay? He's not advocating for you to throw off the chains of your oppression and seize the means of production. Okay, that's not what Bernie Sanders is saying. Bernie Sanders is saying, hey, you know what we could do? We could actually take our immense wealth and guarantee health care for every person in this country, every man, woman, and child, just like they do in all other countries. Hey, yeah, that'd be a great idea. Hey, you know what else? Pay people for work. Yeah, I know. Great idea. And maybe not let 18-year-olds take out tens of thousands of dollars in high interest debt in order to get an education that is, in my perspective, overpriced. That might get you a job that pays $17 an hour. Bernie Sanders is the most responsible politician, not the loosest and craziest. True. Very true, Doug. Very, very true. And so that's the thing. People like Jamie Dimon and the establishment paint Bernie Sanders as someone who is crazy. Oh, crazy leftist. No. Not a crazy leftist. Actually, somebody who has sensible policies that make sense and would actually do a tremendous amount of good. These are things that we can easily do in this country because they've done it in all these other countries. And the only negative thing that they've had is less billionaires, which honestly we could do with a few less billionaires. Just saying. But no, anyway, not only that, but Bernie also says bring back unions. I'm a strong proponent of bringing back union power in this country because right now we need it. We need it. So, all right. Now, Dimon does say, as I pointed out, he wants to fix things, right? Fix the problems of inequality. But the thing is that the things that he proposes really do tweak around the edges. That will continue to perpetuate the system as it is. Nothing that's really going to actually fix the problems. Again, it goes back to, change on the outside, continuity on the inside. Because again, this is a system, and honestly, this is the only system a lot of us have ever known. It's the only system that Jamie Dimon has ever known. And so he's gotten incredibly rich off of this system, incredibly wealthy and fortunate off this system. And so, of course, he's going to advocate for things that generally preserve the status quo. And again, I'm also not saying that Bernie Sanders and AOC and all the social democrats in Congress want to do away with the system. Nobody's saying that. In reality, they're kind of bringing it back to the center. And that's what this is. All right. That said, Jamie Dimon is still on the right. Now, I don't mean the right side is in the correct side, but on the right wing side of this conversation. Again, remember, he says, okay, yeah, I'm open to being taxed because I can lose, a few $100 million, in taxes or whatever a year. And it's not going to significantly affect my life. It's not going to affect me at all. But at the same time, he says, but tax my income, not my wealth. Now, here's what he says. He says, we should tax the rich more, but wealth tax, it's just too complicated to actually make it work. We should tax them as income. Now, the problem with that, taxing people's, rich people's income is, generally it's easier to dodge income taxes as a very wealthy person. Okay. They don't get paid through normal means, like everyone else. Okay. They actually end up getting a lot of their wealth through stock, options, capital gains, dividends, things that allow them to be able to skirt taxes in ways that most of us wouldn't even consider because we don't have those options available to us because we are normal wage earners. All right. And not only that, but Jamie Dimon also thinks that Trump's tax cuts were great for the economy and as well as, deregulation. So Dimon is essentially pro-establishment and he's in favor of tiny little bits of incremental change and no for things like Medicare for all. No, we're not going to mess with capitalism. Of course, we're going to keep capitalism intact. Again, the system has served me very well. And so I want to keep it. I want to keep it. Okay. And at the same time, he understands that because it doesn't work for other people, they've got to do something. And they got to do something because if you don't, the pitchforks are coming. And this is what rich people across the country are starting to see. It's what big corporations are starting to see. All right. And so it's really, it's literally self-preservation. It's gotten to the point of where it's so bad. And I think January 6th was a big wake up, even though this had nothing to do with economics. It had nothing to do with economics. That action in itself, seeing a violent mob storm the Capitol building, was enough to spook everyone. And that's the thing. It's enough to spook so many people. And so, you know, that's really got them very, very concerned. And so now the thing is, I'm actually fine with some of these changes. I think if you do that, you do some of these changes, you tax the rich more, you know, you tweak healthcare to cover more people and, you know, do it a cheaper way. Great. Okay, sweet. Now, the problem is that these things on their own, they're not going to fix the real issues. They're not enough. They're not enough. Yes, $15 an hour. It's good. I'd take the win, but it should be $23 an hour. It should be more. Okay. And it should be tied to productivity, at least. And in the end of the day, we would have far less of what he purports to be against, and that's income inequality. We should also have guaranteed health care for everybody through Medicare for all without out-of-pocket expenses, premiums, deductibles. We should have a guaranteed public education. We should change the way that we fund education. And really, if we want to save our world from climate change, climate devastation in time, we really might want to think about moving beyond capitalism and imperialism, but that's just me. That's just my suggestion here. But the fact is that, yes, though Dimon is proposing some light and modest solutions, which would help people, the fact is that we are facing deep systemic problems that require very deep, complex solutions that are bold, and they're not willing to do that. Okay? He's papering over what is essentially functional rot and foundational rot, and ignoring the role that he himself has played in perpetuating the systems by actively, of course, going after people who are offering more robust solutions. And that's the problem. It seems pretty hypocritical to be concerned about this stuff while then shitting on the same people who are trying to do something about it. It's almost as if they don't want to really fix those core issues, but maybe just give people just enough so that they feel safe from the pitchforks. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.